Emma Reynolds married Lucas Whitmore, believing she'd found her forever. 3 nights later, she was dead, and Lucas was on the run. What looked like a dream honeymoon became a horrifying descent into murder. Emma Reynolds and Lucas Whitmore were the kind of couple people admired from afar. Their relationship seemed to shine with effortless romance, the kind you'd expect in movies or fairy tales. Emma, a 29-year-old kindergarten teacher from a small town in Vermont, was gentle, soft-spoken, and beloved by her community. She spent her days crafting lesson plans, organizing school plays, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. Her life was quiet but full of warmth, centered around family, close friends, and her golden retriever Daisy. Lucas, on the other hand, came from a different world. He was 34, sharp-suited and confident, working as a freelance tech consultant with a portfolio that took him across cities and countries. He lived in Boston and had a fast-paced, adventurous lifestyle that included fine dining, expensive hobbies, and a large online following. When they met at a wedding 2 years before, Emma had been seated alone at a reception table when Lucas approached her with a drink and a smile. Their connection was instant. Within weeks, they were talking every day. Within months, he was making the 4-hour drive to Vermont every weekend. To Emma's friends, Lucas seemed like a dream come true. He was charming, generous, and attentive. He sent flowers to her school. He planned elaborate weekend getaways. He listened, remembered details, and always made her feel special. Their relationship moved quickly, almost too quickly, some thought. But Emma was happy. Her friends said she looked brighter, more confident, as if Lucas had awakened a new side of her. When he proposed on a snowy December evening beneath twinkling Christmas lights, she said yes without hesitation. Their wedding, held in a rustic barn surrounded by pine trees and fairy lights, was nothing short of magical. Photos showed Emma beaming in a lace gown, Lucas holding her close in every frame. Everyone agreed they were perfect together. They chose the Palm Reef Resort in St. Lucia for their honeymoon, a secluded tropical paradise far from the cold of New England. It was meant to be the beginning of a beautiful life together. Emma's friends waved her off with hugs and laughter. "Can't wait to hear all about it," one wrote in a text. But just days later, that same friend would be sobbing in disbelief, unable to understand how such a joyful beginning had ended in horror. The Palm Reef Resort in St. Lucia was everything a newlywed couple could dream of. Tucked away on a quiet stretch of coastline, the resort offered luxury villas with ocean views, private pools, and personalized service. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore created a sense of peace that made the outside world feel far away. Emma and Lucas arrived on a bright Sunday afternoon, holding hands as they stepped off the resort shuttle. Staff welcomed them with champagne and cool towels, placing flower leis around their necks as they were guided to Villa 17, a spacious suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and its own private beach access. For the first 2 days, everything appeared perfect. Emma posted photos of her feet in the sand, tropical cocktails by the pool, and a dinner under the stars with Luke. She wore a sun hat and a wide smile. Other guests noticed the couple, describing them as affectionate, constantly touching, laughing, and kissing. They seemed like they were still in the honeymoon phase, lost in their own world. During the day, they went snorkeling, lounged on cabana beds, and explored local trails with a private guide. At night, they dressed up for dinner, ordering fresh seafood and bottles of wine. Emma chatted easily with waitstaff, always polite and gracious. Lucas was friendly too, often joking with bartenders and leaving generous tips. They were, by all appearances, just another happy couple in paradise. But small cracks began to show, barely noticeable at first. A staff member who delivered room service on the second night recalled hearing raised voices inside the villa before Emma opened the door. Flustered and quiet, she picked at her food, smiled politely when spoken to, and glanced often toward the villa. Lucas, by contrast, was drinking heavily. He ordered 2 glasses of wine, then switched to whiskey. His tone shifted over the course of the evening, growing louder and more animated. When the check came, he signed it quickly, and the two left without another word. That would be the last time anyone saw Emma alive. At 4:13 a.m., the resort's front desk received a call from the landline in Villa 17. The call lasted just under 10 seconds. No one spoke. There was only a faint static sound, followed by a click. The concierge on duty, unsure if it was a prank or an accident, tried to call the room back. No answer. After 3 attempts, he contacted night security and asked them to check in on the guests just to be safe. 2 security officers arrived at Villa 17 around 4:30 a.m. They knocked several times but got no response. The lights were off. The villa was silent. Eventually, they used the master key to open the door. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Emma's body was lying near the edge of the bed, her nightgown torn, her face swollen and bruised beyond recognition. There were cuts on her arms and legs, and blood pooled beneath her head. The room was in disarray. A chair had been knocked over, a lamp was shattered on the floor. Pillows were strewn across the room, and broken glass from a champagne bottle sparkled under the dim light. The officers immediately called local police and cordoned off the area. Lucas was nowhere to be found. Local authorities wasted no time in declaring Lucas the prime suspect. He had disappeared without notifying anyone, and the footage of him leaving the resort just before dawn only deepened suspicions. Officers theorized he may have escaped into the dense tropical forest behind the resort or attempted to reach one of the small nearby harbors. The island, while not large, was surrounded by rugged terrain and thick jungle, offering plenty of places to hide. A manhunt was launched. Police boats patrolled the waters, helicopters flew overhead, and dozens of officers scoured the hills on foot. Flyers with Lucas's photo were printed and distributed to locals and tourists alike. Volunteers joined the effort, some motivated by a sense of justice, others by fear that a killer might be hiding nearby. Every possible exit route from the island was monitored. Airports and docks were alerted, but Lucas had vanished as if into thin air. Inside the villa, forensic experts worked through the chaos. Blood evidence pointed to a violent struggle. Furniture had been smashed, sheets torn, and a trail of smeared blood led from the bed to the bathroom. Emma had fought back. They found her broken fingernails and traces of Lucas's skin beneath them. A bloody towel in the sink suggested he had tried to clean up before fleeing. Meanwhile, friends and family back in the U.S. were just beginning to hear the news. Emma's parents were woken by a call from the U.S. Embassy. Her best friend, who had texted Emma the night before, never received a reply. Social media exploded with confusion and heartbreak as the once envied honeymoon photos were suddenly overlaid with horror. No one could believe it. Lucas, the doting husband with the perfect smile, was now an international fugitive, and the woman who had just said "I do" was dead in a place meant for dreams. As the search for Lucas intensified in St. Lucia, authorities in the United States began digging into his background. At first glance, Lucas Whitmore seemed like a polished professional with a clean record and a successful career in tech consulting. His resume was impressive, his online presence curated and friendly. The first discovery came from a sealed family court file in Massachusetts. Lucas had been married before. His first wife, Melissa Kent, had divorced him after just 8 months of marriage. At the time, she cited irreconcilable differences, but privately, she had told close friends that Lucas was controlling and manipulative. According to those who knew her, she had become isolated, anxious, and withdrawn during their brief marriage. One friend claimed Melissa once showed up at her door in tears with bruises on her arms, but never filed a police report out of fear. After the divorce, Melissa moved out of state and disappeared from social media. It was as though she had erased herself from public life. Her silence made sense now. Lucas had a history of violence. one that never made it into the public eye. Digging further, detectives uncovered more disturbing facts. Lucas had a sealed juvenile record from his teenage years. Though the specific details remained confidential, sources close to the investigation revealed it involved an assault on a classmate during high school. Lucas had reportedly spent time in a juvenile detention facility and was ordered to undergo court-mandated anger management. These records had been hidden for years, never disclosed to Emma or her family. Friends of Lucas, when contacted, painted mixed portraits. Some described him as charming and brilliant, while others admitted he could be volatile when drinking or under pressure. A former business partner recalled a falling out that ended with Lucas smashing equipment in a fit of rage. Still, nothing had ever led to formal charges or public scandal. To those who knew Emma, the revelations were devastating. She had trusted him, loved him, and believed in the life they were building together. But Lucas had been living a double life. One carefully constructed to conceal a violent temper, a history of control, and a past that now appeared to be repeating itself in the most tragic way imaginable. 4 days after Emma's body was discovered, the manhunt that had gripped the island finally came to an end. It was a local fisherman who first noticed movement near an abandoned hut along the northern coast of St. Lucia. The structure sat just outside a small village, partially hidden by overgrown brush and thick trees. The man had gone to check on his fishing nets at sunrise when he saw a barefoot man crouched inside, trying to remain unseen. Alarmed, he alerted the local police, who arrived swiftly with backup. Inside the hut, officers found Lucas Whitmore lying on a dirt floor, covered in sweat, sunburned, and visibly dehydrated. He was wearing the same clothes seen in the surveillance footage from the resort. A hoodie, cargo shorts, and now tattered sneakers. His backpack contained an empty water bottle, granola bars, a map of the island, and a small amount of cash. His passport was missing, left behind in the villa. He was silent as the officers handcuffed him, offering no resistance and showing no emotion. Not a word was spoken as he was placed in the back of the police truck and driven away. The public reaction was swift and furious. On social media, people expressed outrage and heartbreak, sharing photos of Emma's smiling face beside headlines about the arrest. At the resort, guests expressed a mix of relief and unease. Some canceled their stays early, unwilling to remain at a place now associated with a brutal crime. Lucas's arrest brought temporary closure to the search, but many questions remained unanswered. Why had he killed Emma? Was it premeditated, or had something snapped inside him? Why did he flee instead of calling for help or turning himself in? He refused to speak during initial questioning and requested legal counsel. Despite being confronted with evidence and photographs from the crime scene, he showed no reaction. It would be months before the truth began to emerge. But one thing was clear. The man once celebrated as a loving husband had transformed into something unrecognizable. The fairy tale was over, and the nightmare was only beginning. Back at the resort, investigators continued piecing together what had happened in Villa 17. Every detail mattered. Forensics teams worked methodically, gathering evidence from the scene that could help explain how and why Emma Reynolds was killed. Blood spatter analysis showed signs of repeated blows. The headboard, smeared with blood, indicated that Emma had likely been struck while lying down. A shattered champagne bottle, stained red and found under the bed, was identified as one of the weapons used in the attack. Nearby, a table lamp lay broken, its base smeared with fingerprints and hair. There had been no forced entry, no signs of an intruder. The violence had come from inside the room. Emma's autopsy confirmed the brutality of the assault. She had suffered multiple skull fractures, a broken jaw, and defensive wounds on her hands and forearms. There were signs she had tried to shield herself, to crawl away. The attack had not been quick. It had been prolonged, angry, and personal. The coroner determined she had likely died sometime between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m. just before the silent phone call was made to the front desk. Perhaps the most heartbreaking discovery came from Emma's personal belongings. Tucked in her suitcase was a small leather-bound journal. The last entry, dated the evening before her death, painted a chilling picture. In it, Emma wrote about feeling unsure of Lucas's behavior. She mentioned that he had been drinking more than usual and had become paranoid and accusatory. She described him shouting about trust, about her ruining everything. She ended the entry with a single sentence: "I just want to go home." Investigators also reviewed security footage from the hotel bar. On the night of the murder, Lucas was seen sitting alone for over an hour. During that time, he consumed 6 double whiskeys. Footage showed him visibly agitated, clenching his fists, pacing between the bar and the veranda, muttering to himself. At one point, he slammed his glass down so hard the bartender asked if everything was okay. Lucas nodded but said nothing. Witness statements from hotel staff confirmed the tension. One housekeeper recalled Emma asking quietly if early checkout was possible. Another mentioned seeing her sitting alone by the pool that afternoon, staring into space. Each detail added to the growing picture: a woman in fear, a man unraveling, and a honeymoon spiraling into a nightmare that no one had seen coming. Until it was far too late. As the investigation deepened, a clearer motive began to emerge, one that painted Lucas Whitmore not only as violent, but calculated. Detectives turned their attention to the couple's finances and quickly uncovered a trail of hidden debts and financial instability that Lucas had never shared with Emma. Though he had presented himself as a successful tech consultant, his accounts told a different story. He hadn't held a steady contract in over a year. Several of his business partnerships had collapsed, and he owed tens of thousands in credit card debt. There were missed mortgage payments on a condo in Boston and failed investments in cryptocurrency that had wiped out what little savings he had left. But the most damning piece of evidence came in the form of an insurance policy. Just 6 weeks before the wedding, Emma had added Lucas as the sole beneficiary on a life insurance policy through her school district. The policy, worth $500,000, had been standard coverage offered to employees, but it had only recently been increased after Lucas suggested she make sure everything was in place before the wedding. Emails showed he had even helped her fill out the paperwork. At the time, no one questioned it. Newlyweds planning for their future often take such steps. But now, in the shadow of Emma's death, it looked like something far more sinister. Emma's family was stunned. They had never known Lucas to be anything but generous and attentive. Yet, looking back, her parents recalled subtle red flags. Lucas pushing for a quick engagement, taking control over wedding expenses, even insisting that he and Emma handle honeymoon arrangements alone, without help. Friends admitted there had been moments of unease, but nothing concrete enough to raise alarm. Lucas had simply seemed like a strong personality, someone who took charge. What investigators now saw was a man who had carefully constructed an image to gain trust. He had planned the wedding, encouraged the insurance change, and booked an expensive honeymoon on borrowed credit, all while drowning in debt. With Emma gone, the insurance money would have solved everything. The theory came into focus when Emma began to pull away. When she showed signs of wanting to leave, Lucas snapped. The dream life he had built around deception was falling apart, and rather than let it unravel, he chose to destroy it, violently, permanently, and without remorse. In the days following Lucas's arrest, a series of shocking details began to surface, painting a darker portrait of the man behind the charming friends, acquaintances, and even former partners came forward with stories of manipulation, threats, and emotional abuse. Social media posts from years before were revisited, revealing cryptic messages and sudden disappearances that had previously gone unnoticed. Lucas's online persona, a polished, successful consultant, stood in stark contrast to the reality emerging from interviews and police reports. One former girlfriend recounted how Lucas would isolate her from friends and family, insisting that she cut ties with anyone who didn't understand him. Another described nights filled with verbal assaults and controlling behavior, where minor mistakes became grounds for intense punishment. These patterns, once hidden, now seemed chillingly consistent. Investigators also uncovered evidence that Lucas had been involved in questionable online activities, including gambling and high-risk financial schemes. These pursuits had drained his resources and led to conflicts with business partners. In an attempt to cover mounting losses, Lucas had taken out loans under false pretenses and forged signatures on important documents. It was a man spiraling deeper into desperation. Emma's family found some solace in these revelations, feeling that the truth was finally coming to light. But it also raised painful questions. How had Emma missed the warning sign? Had she been too trusting, too hopeful? Or had Lucas hidden his darker nature so well that no one, not even Emma, could see it until it was too late? Meanwhile, the media frenzy intensified. News outlets across the country ran headlines about the tragic Honeymoon murder, focusing on the stark contrast between the couple's joyful beginnings and the brutal end. Documentaries and true crime podcasts began covering the case, drawing public fascination and debate. Many questioned how someone with such a violent past could slip through the cracks and find new victims. Legal experts noted the complexity of the case. Prosecutors prepared a strong case against Lucas, including evidence of premeditation, financial motive, and a history of abuse. Defense attorneys, meanwhile, hinted at possible mental health issues, suggesting Lucas might argue diminished responsibility. As the trial date approached, the nation remained captivated by the story, a haunting reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the people closest to us harbor the darkest secrets. Emma's memory lived on in the hearts of those who loved her, while the truth about Lucas Whitmore slowly unraveled in the courtroom spotlight. The courtroom became the stage where years of pain, secrets, and unanswered questions were laid bare. The trial of Lucas Whitmore gripped the nation as prosecutors presented a detailed, chilling case built on evidence from the resort, Emma's journal, financial records, and witness testimony. The narrative was clear. Lucas had planned the murder, motivated by greed, desperation, and a deeply troubled mind. The prosecution described how Lucas's debts had spiraled out of control and how he saw Emma's life insurance policy as a way out. They painted a picture of a man who manipulated, controlled, and finally destroyed the person he was supposed to love most. The jury listened closely as friends and family shared memories of Emma, a kind, gentle woman who dreamed of a happy future. Her voice, through those diary entries, echoed in the courtroom, reminding everyone that behind the headlines was a real person whose life was violently cut short. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. When the verdict was finally announced, Lucas Whitmore was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read, the weight of justice settling heavily on those present. In the aftermath, Emma's family spoke about their hope that her story would raise awareness about domestic violence and the importance of recognizing warning signs. They set up a foundation in her name to support victims of abuse and to help others escape dangerous relationships. Though nothing could bring Emma back, her memory became a powerful reminder that love should never hurt, and that sometimes the greatest danger lies behind the smiles we trust most.